Welcome, everyone. It's 9 a.m. and we'll start in 1 minute to give everyone a chance to join as there's a large number of participants on this workshop. All right, it seems like folks are almost done filing in. Good morning, everyone. We're ready to start this meeting and want to inform everyone that this workshop is being recorded. Thank you for joining us for the Senate Bill or SB 1075 Joint Agency Kickoff Workshop. We have a series of panelists from CARB, as well as the California Energy Commission, California Public Utilities Commission, and Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development that outline the state's current and ongoing work on hydrogen, alongside a discussion of the comprehensive analysis mandated by SB 1075 that will explore how hydrogen can be used to meet the state's air quality and climate goals. Presentations for this workshop have been posted to the Meetings and Workshop page of CARB's SB 1075 website, along with the agenda, as you can see on screen there. And as mentioned, this meeting will be recorded and posted to the same location. Our plan today is to have 4 panelists, 1 from each organization, give a short presentation on their work. We'll have a break in the middle and 2 public comment periods. For the public comment period, we ask that commenters use the raise hand function as described in this slide, so that CARB staff can call on you and unmute you to speak. Any comments that can't be made during these periods can be submitted on CARB's website in written form up to September 19th. To kick things off, our Deputy Executive Officer for Climate Change and Research, Virginia Sahota, will say a few words.
Thank you, Jaya, and good morning and welcome to the Interagency Kickoff meeting for SB 1075. I'm Virginia Sahota, the Deputy Executive Officer for Climate Change and Research at CARB. Through the workshop, you will hear from our colleagues at GO-Biz, CPUC, and CEC. With the approval of the 2022 Scoping Plan, Governor's Climate Budget, proceedings at the energy agencies, and the once-in-a-lifetime federal incentives, the state is acting to incorporate renewable hydrogen into programs and sees this energy source as a critical path to reduce our dependence on fossil fuel energy. You will also hear how the private investment sector is leaning into this energy source in the ARCHES process. The rapid transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy, as called for by the latest science, will take all tools we have and resources of both public and private sectors. The SB 1075 process will allow for all stakeholders to share their perspectives and priorities as the staff works through the topics the legislature has prioritized in the statute. We will continue the collaboration that we begin today with our sister agencies throughout the drafting of the report. And I want to thank our colleagues from the other agencies for their time to present today and the staff for pulling the workshop together. I look forward to hearing all of your thoughts and will now pass it back to Jaya. Thank you. You're on mute, Jaya.
Oh, God, I pressed it. Thank you, Rajinder. Our first panelist is Carrie Byland, manager of the energy section at CARB. She will cover CARB's work on hydrogen in the 2022 scoping plan, as well as the tasks laid out in SB 1075.
Thank you, Jaya, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. If we could move over to my slides now. I am not seeing the slides change. Sorry, everyone, just waiting a second for the slides to come up. Okay, sorry. Looks like the technical difficulty is on my side, so I think everyone else can see the slides. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. If somebody else could just confirm. There we go. Okay. Great. So if you could go to the next slide. All right, here we go. Sorry about that. So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Carrie Byland. I'm a manager at the California Air Resources Board. And today I'm going to be talking about giving an overview of the 2022 scoping plan update, and specifically the role that the scoping plan envisions for hydrogen in achieving carbon neutrality. So this slide is an overview of the climate policy framework that guides the work at CARB. Greenhouse gas targets and goals are informed by legislation and executive orders, such as AB and SB 32, that provide targets for total statewide greenhouse gas emissions. And of course, there are also sector-specific targets. The scoping plan is an actionable plan that lays out a cost-effective and technologically feasible path to ensure we meet the statewide greenhouse gas reduction targets in a way that is consistent with all existing directives. It is updated every 5 years. After each scoping plan is adopted, CARB and the other state agencies start the process of reviewing and updating related programs or developing new programs to align with any outcomes identified in the scoping plan. Regardless of the tool, a regulation or incentive, we need projects on the ground and in operation to realize the emissions reductions laid out in any plan. Next slide. This slide helps to put the state's climate goals into perspective. The line graph on the left shows annual emissions from 2000 to 2020 and California's statutory greenhouse gas emission reduction targets for 2020, 2030, and 2045. The greenhouse gas emissions inventory shows that California achieved the 2020 AB 32 target of returning to 1990 emissions levels several years early in 2014, and the inventory has remained below the target through 2020. In 2016, the legislature called for a 40% reduction in emissions below 1990 levels by 2030. And recently, in 2022, AB 1279 established two goals: to reduce the anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions by 85% compared to 1990 levels by 2045, and to achieve carbon neutrality no later than 2045, meaning that for whatever emission sources that exist at that point, there is an equivalent or greater amount of natural or technological carbon sinks. Next slide. This ambition is evidenced within the 2022 Scoping Plan update, which identifies a need to accelerate the 2030 target to 48% below 1990 levels to be on track to meet AB 1279 goals. The Scoping Plan identified mechanical carbon dioxide removal as key to achieving more ambitious 2030 and 2045 Scoping Plan scenario targets. Mechanical carbon dioxide removal methods include direct air capture and carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration, which are shown on the slide using the acronyms DAC and CCUS. Renewable hydrogen has also emerged as an important clean fuel. Each Scoping Plan is a high-level document spanning all sectors to lay out a comprehensive framework on how the pieces of the state's climate strategy fit together. Next slide. Here you see the Scoping Plan anticipates dramatic reductions: a 94% reduction in liquid petroleum fuels demand and an 86% reduction in total fossil fuel demand. This will be accomplished by transitioning to clean energy, in part to clean electricity and renewable hydrogen. Next slide. With high levels of electrification in various sectors, we need a clean electrical grid as the backbone for the transition. We estimate that demand for electricity would almost double. Meeting demand will require significant build-out of wind and solar, along with increases in other renewable resources. We also need to ensure the grid provides reliable and affordable clean power to power the vehicles, homes, and industries that California relies on. But not everything can be electrified. The 2022 Scoping Plan does not call for any new gas capacity to be added as demand grows for electricity. To meet additional demand growth, we are relying on a mix of strategies, including offshore wind, battery storage, hydrogen generation, and demand response to ensure the grid meets growing demand and continues to provide clean, reliable, and affordable power. As a result of these changes, reliance on existing gas generation declines over time, and we see a nearly 50% reduction in fossil gas used by the electric sector, and this is occurring will be by 2045, and this halving of fossil gas use will happen as electricity demand almost doubles. Next slide. The 2022 Scoping Plan update emphasizes all tools available to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere to achieve carbon neutrality. This will require deployment of a broad portfolio of existing and emerging fossil fuel alternatives to achieve deep decarbonization across multiple sectors of the economy. While electrification is poised to play a significant role in California's strategy, the Scoping Plan calls for accelerating the transition from combustion of fossil fuels to hydrogen, including as a fuel for ocean-going, rail, air, and road transport, and as a non-fossil energy resource in the industrial sector. As you will see on the following slides, the 2022 Scoping Plan update envisions significant growth of low-carbon hydrogen, and we anticipate the need to rely on multiple hydrogen production methods to provide needed supply. We will seek to leverage federal funding and other incentives to achieve this growth in hydrogen production, distribution, and use. Doing so can have significant beneficial impacts on greenhouse gas and local air pollutant emissions, from hydrogen end use to use relative to fossil fuels. In addition, reducing use of fossil natural gas will reduce methane emissions, a short-lived climate pollutant with an outsized impact on near-term climate change. And to the extent possible, we want to prioritize non-combustion options for hydrogen use to help the state meet its air quality goals. Next slide. In the 2022 Scoping Plan update, hydrogen is an alternative fuel for liquid transportation fuels and natural gas, and the modeling estimated the annual amount of hydrogen from now out to 2045 that may be needed to substitute for fossil fuels. The modeling assumes that hydrogen is supplied by three methods: electrolysis powered from zero carbon electricity, steam methane reformation of biogas, and biomass gasification with carbon capture and storage. The volume that each method could contribute is shown on the slide. The 2022 Scoping Plan update did not include the electricity needed to produce the hydrogen in the modeling of the electricity sector as a whole. Rather, it includes an approximate amount of off-grid solar or dedicated solar electricity generation that directly feeds hydrogen production and is not integrated with the broader electrical grid. The amount of electricity needed for electrolysis was estimated at about 10 gigawatts in 2045. And for context, this represents about 12% of installed in-state generation capacity in 2022. Next slide. The 2022 Scoping Plan update modeled integration of low-carbon hydrogen in multiple sectors and anticipates that hydrogen fuel cell vehicles and other non-combustion uses in the transportation sector will serve as an important part of the state's transition to zero-emission vehicles, particularly for medium and heavy-duty vehicles. Other end uses with less total demand make up the rest of the anticipated uses. These uses include renewable hydrogen, that is, blended into the natural gas system to reduce fossil gas use in buildings, routed to dedicated pipelines to reduce fossil fuel in certain industries, and used to meet growing electricity demand when on-demand generation is required. Next slide. Achieving carbon neutrality is California's most ambitious climate goal ever, and it will deliver major benefits. It requires unprecedented deployment of low-carbon technology and energy in harnessing nature-based climate solutions from our natural and working lands. This slide highlights key metrics showing the scale of transformation called for within the next 23 years. The Scoping Plan scenario shows that by 2045, we will need 37 times as many light, medium, and heavy-duty zero-emission vehicles on the road, 6 times as many electric appliances in homes, 1,700 times as much hydrogen supply to meet growing hydrogen demand, 4 times as much installed wind and solar generation capacity, and action on over 2.5 million acres of natural and working lands per year. These key outcomes are part of the suite of actions driving substantial greenhouse gas reductions. Achieving the plan's outcomes for clean energy and technology deployment and natural and working lands management would result in a 94% decrease in liquid petroleum demand, a 91% decrease in fossil gas used in buildings, a 66% decrease in methane emissions from agriculture, and a 10% reduction in wildfire emissions. Next slide. In summary, the 2022 Scoping Plan anticipates cutting air pollution by more than 71%, slashing anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions by 85%, decreasing gasoline consumption by 94%, creating 4 million new jobs, and saving Californians hundreds of billions of dollars in health costs. This is in addition to the many other quantified and unquantifiable benefits that are anticipated to result from the implementation of the 2022 Scoping Plan. I will now turn, next slide, yeah, thank you. I will now turn to the future of hydrogen in California and the direction in SB 1075. Next slide. The current state and federal policy landscape provides a critical opportunity to expand hydrogen production and use in California. At the federal level, the Biden administration is committing to and prioritizing a clean energy future and providing resources needed to deploy effective programs and strategies through efforts that include the Department of Energy's Regional Clean Hydrogen Hubs program and the Inflation Reduction Act 45V hydrogen production tax credits. These investments will catalyze the development of carbon-free energy and fuels, accelerate industrial decarbonization, improve energy security, create jobs, and help communities benefit from clean energy investments. The federal efforts are a strong complement to California's actions, which include Governor Newsom's recently announced hydrogen market development strategy, which takes an all-of-government approach to building up California's renewable hydrogen market, and ARCHES, a public-private partnership tasked with establishing a hydrogen ecosystem that drives down the cost of renewable hydrogen while increasing renewable energy penetration and achieving our net zero and carbon goals on an accelerated schedule. These efforts are supported by regional and local initiatives such as the Angeles Link and Lancaster Hydrogen City. CARB also has several complementary regulations, including the Low Carbon Fuel Standard, Advanced Clean Fleets, and Advanced Clean Trucks to increase ZEV and hydrogen deployment. And CARB, in consultation with our agency partners and via a public process, will be doing additional analysis and making recommendations under SB 1075. Next slide. Despite strong momentum and alignment of state and federal opportunities, there is still much work ahead to achieve the needed expansion of hydrogen production and use in California. This includes alignment of local actions to support state and federal air quality and climate goals, and to leverage state and federal funding opportunities. To meet the state's air quality and climate goals, we need more infrastructure to support hydrogen production and use, and need to align local permitting actions with the scale of the current opportunity. Additional funding and regulatory efforts are also needed to support expansion of low-carbon hydrogen supply and non-combustion uses. State and federal market signals should also spur private sector investment. Lastly, we need further policy and technical evaluations to support increased hydrogen production and deployment, including analyses of water and air quality implications. In recognition of these important needs, last year the legislature passed SB 1075. Next slide. SB 1075 requires CARB, in consultation with California Energy Commission, California Public Utilities Commission, California Workforce Development Board, and other partner agencies, to produce a comprehensive report on hydrogen due in June of 2024. Next slide. SB 1075 directs CARB, in partnership with other partner agencies, to conduct a broad range of technical, market, and policy analyses that will support hydrogen production and use across many sectors of the economy, including those that are most difficult to decarbonize. These analyses will also support a broad range of other priorities, including air quality benefits and workforce development. They include policy recommendations regarding the use of hydrogen, strategies to support hydrogen infrastructure, the potential for non-renewable hydrogen to achieve emissions reductions, using curtailed electricity for hydrogen production, estimated greenhouse gas emissions, air quality benefits, and costs associated with deploying renewable hydrogen, including when compared to alternatives, opportunities to integrate hydrogen into drinking water supply treatment needs, regulatory and permitting processes for hydrogen transmission and distribution, life cycle emissions of various forms of hydrogen production, and air pollution and other environmental impacts from hydrogen distribution and end uses. This is a list of analyses that are asked for specifically in SB 1075. Next slide. This slide gives a high-level overview of the timeline for this work, including today's kickoff workshop, and an estimate of the final report timeline based on guidance from the legislature. Next slide. In terms of next steps, we are seeking your input as we begin this analysis. We will have 2 public comment sessions during today's workshop, and a link to submit written comments will be available on CARB's SB 1075 website, the link for which is shown on this slide. The comment period will be open for 2 weeks, and written feedback will be accepted through September 19, 2023. Please visit our website or reach out to us at the email listed for more information. That concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, and we look forward to the rest of the discussion.
Thank you, Carrie, for that presentation about CARB's work on hydrogen in the scoping plan and on SB 1075. Also, just a quick note for anyone with their hands up, the public comment section will be coming later. We unfortunately can't call on hands now, but hold that thought for when that section comes up. Next, Tyson Eckerly, Senior Advisor for Clean Infrastructure and Mobility from the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, also known as GO-Biz. We'll discuss the office's work on ARCHES, a public-private partnership to establish a clean, renewable hydrogen hub in California, and California's hydrogen market development strategy.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Jay. Thanks, Jay, and thank you, Carrie, for that great presentation. It's a really exciting time in hydrogen now, especially because you've seen everything laid out from the scoping plan. There's a lot to do, a lot to build to get to carbon neutrality for us. And so I want to talk a little bit about our role, about the context where we are in the market. The first thing, with the title slide here, and I probably should have put a GO-Biz slide as well, but it's, all about the Alliance for Renewable Clean Hydrogen Energy Systems, which is a public-private partnership that we co-founded GO-Biz along with the University of California, State Building and Construction Trades, and Renewables 100 to organize stakeholders to go after federal hydrogen funding. And then it's blossomed into kind of a good overview of the system itself. And if we go to the next slide, I wanted to give us a little bit of context for where we are. So you may be familiar, this is a pretty common graphic that the Department of Energy has been doing for their Hydrogen at Scale initiative that's been going on for a long time. And the exciting part about hydrogen is you can make it from just about anything and you can use it in multiple sectors. And that's kind of the whole concept behind that. And what we're trying to do is figure out in California, how do we best leverage this to meet our climate goals? And so, having there, like, our focus in California is exclusively on renewables. It's an opportunity to build new renewable hydrogen markets to go into all these hard to decarbonize sectors. And I think that's exactly what the, SB 1075 report will help us, further refine as we go through time. But what really that organizing function, there was, the IIJA, or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, set up, I think people are very familiar, but $9.5 billion for clean hydrogen production. So $8 billion of that would go into at least 4 regional clean hydrogen hubs. California has applied to be one of those, and then $1 billion for electrolysis research, development, and demonstration. Another $500 million for clean hydrogen technology manufacturing and recycling R&D. And so that has been a very interesting process because of the big value associated with that. Lots of action all across the country organized around this hydrogen opportunity. And right now the DOE is, we're in the final stages of figuring out who is going to be awarded for that funding. It's up to $1 billion per hub. And so we'll see how that all goes. There's also, in complement to the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or the IIJA, the IRA has a production tax credit, which can be up to $3 per kilogram for the most, carbon negative hydrogen. And that is a huge driver. And so what we're seeing, these two laws really work well together. You have the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Hydrogen Hub serving as a forcing organizing function, and coupled, to get stakeholders together, help set the direction, kickstart the market. And then the IRA is really designed to help the market scale. And we've seen this happen quite a bit in California, for example, our zero emission vehicle market is like that with the ZEV regulations. Then you start to scale from that foundation, leveraging low carbon fuel standard, for example. But the main point here is with this excitement, we can really leverage hydrogen to decarbonize that hard to decarbonize sectors like transportation, like ammonia, fertilizer. And we'll talk a little bit more about this going forward. If you go to the next slide, I wanted to outline ARCH's mission. So we've been at it for pretty close to 2 years now. So it's a public-private partnership really to create a sustainable statewide renewable clean hydrogen market and ecosystem in California and beyond. The idea is to utilize all renewable resources to produce hydrogen and to really fully decarbonize the regional economy. So directly in line with the scoping plan and everything that we need to do to meet carbon neutrality. As an organization, and we prioritize environmental justice, equity, economic leadership, workforce development, and really creating a viable hydrogen market. If you go to the next slide, just a little bit more on ARCH's goals. So California has long led the nation in all of these policies, and we want to do the same thing for hydrogen. The idea is something that we can scale here in California and help other regions find success as well. So we want to build this hub within the context of the bipartisan infrastructure law, by 2030. So as we go through the presentation, you'll see like the full build out is expected in 2030. We want to kickstart commercial viability of hydrogen. One of the things we've learned is there is a lot of commercial interest in this market, which is really exciting. The hardest part is it takes a lot of scale and a lot of actors to make it work. And so as ARCHs, we're focusing on the hard to decarbonize sector. So, it's ports, it's power, it's heavy duty transportation. And then that can really enable that scale that those three initial markets do. So it can help initiate the expansion into really heavy industries, into aviation, into maritime, agriculture, and others. And so there's a lot of excitement. And once we get the price of hydrogen down, the cost of hydrogen down, what other market opportunities this opens up. And these can all be done in parallel. The idea here is to ramp our production and offtake of renewable clean hydrogen to 30 tons per day, from 30 tons per day today to 500 plus tons per day by 2030. So that's a lot of scale. It aligns with the scoping plan, that 1,700 times productions in that context. And we want to make sure that we're getting measurable benefits for California communities with robust monitoring and strong accountability. And so those benefits are things like health benefits, of course, but jobs as well. And that's really about that hydrogen workforce in California, and the partnership with the state building construction trades and the rest of the organized labor has been really, really strong throughout this, because it's a huge opportunity to create family supporting jobs for multiple people throughout many regions. And finally, we want to make sure that we're meeting California's goals first and foremost, and then it's setting the stage for national carbon neutrality goals, showing that it is possible, because we could do it in California, but far better to accelerate across most of the rest of the nation, just like our zero emission vehicle market. If you go to the next slide, I wanted to talk a little bit about ARCHs. So it is built on a foundation of principles. So when we kicked off ARCHs to get this going, we wanted to make sure that we had a statewide hub to give ourselves the best chance to bring in federal funding to California. We wanted to make sure it's clean hydrogen, green hydrogen, and renewable, meaning, based on carbon intensity. We wanted to make sure we had broad stakeholder and community input, and we've learned a lot through time. We've got a lot of engagement there. In the middle here, the hub had to be equity and justice centered. We have the Justice 40 initiative, of course, but we want to go above and beyond in California, making sure that we're delivering benefits to the communities that need them the most. We wanted to make sure that this whole thing was aligned with our state interests. So the scoping plan has been our North Star through all this. We want to make sure we're solution oriented and getting stuff in the ground, objective and unbiased in terms of bringing the market to really taking the system perspective, not just individual project by project, but from a whole system. How do we build something holistic that can last? That feeds into being, multidimensional. It's a cross sector. It's connected. And then, the we have this both in our principles, but also in our differentiators. It's, delivery certainty. So making sure that we actually get these projects in the ground, and there's a lot of work to be done there. And then on those principles, we have our kind of pillars of this. So, we have industry, of course, lots of investment opportunities. We have higher education, so our partnership with the University of California, all the UC campuses. We have the DOE's national labs that they oversee, and they've been incredibly strong in the partnership. We have the state, of course, organized labor and labor in general, and then communities. And so these are kind of the pillars that drive everything forward. And then our key differentiators are really center around what California is. So we lead the nation in new hydrogen markets. We have, early infrastructure we can build on top of. We're ready to go. The whole pitch to the DOE is, we're ready to go right now, given our strong regulatory environment and investment interest. We have lots of diverse offtake. We can serve as a market catalyst. We're connected across our communities, and we can really build up this thing. So that's kind of Arches in a nutshell. If you go to the next slide. So once we kind of knew about the federal funding opportunity, we held a project selection thing, and we wanted to make sure that we were clear on what we were looking for. And so we put out an open RFP to attract proposals. And so the four things we wanted to make sure that the projects helped enable a sustainable hydrogen economy and the broader Arches ecosystem, which means hydrogen writ large. We wanted to get a lot of co-funding and make sure that the projects have a market viability. We wanted to make sure that this isn't just a one-stop and then you're done. This is like, this project leads to more projects. And then, of course, on the foundation, we wanted to make sure that the projects provided strong community benefits. And so when we did that, we actually got a very robust thing. We had multiple independent parties review the applications. And then once we had that information, we started negotiating to fit together a system that would work, that would not only for those projects, one of those keystone type of projects that really open up the market for broader participation. If you go to the next slide, this is a view of our ecosystem. So what we pulled together was a pretty complex proposal with 39 projects in what we call Tier 1. And those are the projects that we recommended for federal co-funding. And those are scattered throughout the state. And that's kind of that first step in creating this ecosystem of approach where we have resilience across multiple sectors. If any of those projects fall through, we have our Tier 2 projects, which were also great projects, but didn't, at a certain point, we just don't have enough funding to go around. Those are ready to go, kind of shovel-ready type projects. This is 31 in the backup. And then Tier 3, we have, over 400 OEMs, technology providers, and suppliers. And so it's a pretty robust across the state ecosystem. If you go to the next slide, this is how we're thinking about bringing hydrogen into the economy, again, aligned with the scoping plan, what we need. So you really have two feedstocks, renewable electricity, and remember, this is all renewable, clean hydrogen, and biogenic sources like municipal waste, like woody biomass, like wastewater. If you go to the next click, then of course, from that feedstock, we have to make hydrogen. So we have electrolysis, which has a big component of that. So directly connected renewables also tied into the grid. You have water. Our projects are, for the most part, on recycled, reclaimed water. And then you have biohydrogen project from the biogenic source, along with carbon capture when appropriate. If you go to the next slide, then you have to once you've made it, we have to get it somewhere. So we're prioritizing liquid hydrogen trucks early in the market because you can get those going fast to get it going, but it's really to drive the cost down, you need pipelines. And so we have some pipeline investments there. There's also hydrogen storage, but what we've done in this proposal and this approach is balancing supply and demand. So we don't have to have a ton of storage. Now, storage will play an increasingly prominent role going forward, especially as we look to balance our renewable portfolio across multiple seasons. But in this early thing, we try to match supply and demand as much as possible to help make sure that the economics drive costs out of the system. And then if you go to the next click, now we have kind of where does this go? So there are three initial sectors: are hydrogen for power generation, so it's both fuel cells and turbines. Once the fuel cells can scale, we think we can replace the turbines, but we need that base load power or that peaker power with hydrogen combustion there. We have transportation, focusing the ARCHES application on trucks and buses. That doesn't mean, we don't enable light duty as well, but we're really focusing this on getting to scale, and those are big consumers of hydrogen. And ports, of course, have an outsized impact on air quality in the surrounding communities. So you can look at kind of the scale of the numbers there. You can see transportation, this is that full build out, is the biggest, and that's where most of the benefits are driven from. And also, I think where California can really shine, given our strong zero emission vehicle regulatory environment. But it's important to note that hydrogen for power generation, how important that is as an early off-taker that can sign contracts that we can finance production against. And that's a huge piece of what this theory is to move the market forward. If you go to the next slide, so here's kind of on the right, you can kind of see this is the statewide concept. So you can see we have both production and offtake. So a lot of production in the valley, a lot of offtake in our areas of populations. And then this, tablet over here on deployment, like what does it look like? So if we can sum it up in one sentence, it is carbon negative hydrogen, essentially at the cost of diesel by 2030. That's what we're shooting for. So you can see we have different costs here. And of course, this is, based on models and projection with some conservative assumptions, but, it's looking between $7 and $5 cost of hydrogen. We're adding pipelines, we're adding trucks. The carbon life cycle carbon intensity gets negative because of the biogenic parts of this. Transit buses there. And then we have, of course, transportation infrastructure and port and cargo handling equipment. And the port and cargo handling equipment is interesting in its own right because hydrogen's able to do kind of a one-for-one replacement of diesel using the same fueling system, so to speak, or as diesel is bringing the fuel out to the equipment on a mobile fueler, and it's a very similar approach. If you go to the next slide, this is kind of our Andy Warhol type of image here. You can see that, on the top left, we have of this, the Andy Warhol thing, we have our sites kind of mapped on the map. And it does map with our disadvantaged communities. It's all pulling from our, from real data with our low income communities and air pollution. And I think a ton of benefit comes from that air thing, which is, essentially what drove us as a state in the first part. And so if you look here on the right, there's the list of some of the benefits, and you can see it's a subsection of what Carrie talked about. Close to $3 billion per year in health cost savings, and this is from 5,000 trucks and 1,000 buses and the power production. We're projecting over 200,000 jobs created per year, like family supporting jobs. 2,000 fewer hospitalizations for respiratory and cardiac illness. We have 13,000 fewer work loss days. NOx net emissions goes down close to 7,000. And sulfur dioxide, particulate matter net emissions go down, avoided tons per year. And then the premature deaths, 48, which is always such a morbid number, but it's there. And then importantly, there's a $380 million through the course of this thing invested in community benefits and workforce development. And the idea there is to work very closely with communities hand in hand to make sure that the investments going into the communities are what those communities want to see. And of course, on the jobs part, we have great partnerships from all levels of academia and community college, the CSUs, the UC, high school, and then of course with organized labor and their training partnerships to make sure that we have that workforce ready to build this out. If you go to the next slide, so I wanted to shift gears a little bit. So that was kind of ARCHES and what we put out to the DOE, and I think we'll see how that all shakes out. But it's important to know that there is a tremendous amount of commercial interest in California, and in California for the right reasons, and it's because people see the value in building renewable hydrogen infrastructure to meet our climate goals. And so related to all of this, and this was mentioned before, but just recently, about a month ago, Governor Newsom announced her strategy to develop the hydrogen economy of the future. It's our hydrogen market development strategy, which is an all-of-government approach, really modeled after the ZEV market development strategy, which I assume some of you are familiar with. If you're curious, you can go through and look at that, kind of what we're thinking. The idea here is to have really kind of organize the market as much as possible and make sure we understand who's doing what. And if you go to the next slide, forgive me because my graphics department is me sometimes, and it's easier to get this sketched out. I'll talk this through for those who have a hard time reading the writing. But if you think about the hydrogen market development strategy and its role, like we already have if you think about the questions that we have, why and when are already are answered. We need to be carbon neutral by 2045. It's in statute, in law. It's a legally binding target, not just a goal. We can't walk away of it. So it's AB 1279. What do we need to do to get there? Luckily we have the 2022 scoping plan that's fully outlined across sector, really incredible leading document to do that. The hydrogen market development strategy really will focus in on the how and the who. And so we have a number of reports, for example, this SB 1075 report, which is incredibly important and Carrie talked about that. But we also have the IPR, the Integrated Energy Policy Report. We have white papers that Arches are developing that have kind of multi-sector. We have SB 643, SB 671, et cetera. All of those reports are answering unique questions, and we need to make sure that it all jives together. But it's not just about reports; it's about investment. It's about getting all the partners working together and making sure that we are all on the same page, in the same boat, rowing in the same general direction. Hopefully the same direction, but at least the same general direction, and creating and making sure that as problems arise, we as the state of California, but everybody as stakeholders know where to go to solve those problems. So just like the ZEV market development strategy, we'll be laying out objectives for the agencies, defining stakeholder roles. We have multiple great organizations that are supporting the hydrogen market. I mentioned Arches, which will be foundational to the strategy, but at the risk of forgetting somebody, but we have the Hydrogen Fuel Cell Partnership, the Hydrogen Business Council, Green Hydrogen Coalition, and there are more. But helping define those roles and make sure that we're all on the same page, pulling the same direction. And then I just there at the model again is the ZEV market development strategy. So hopefully that helps. So the hydrogen strategy will answer some questions, but not all, but at the very least, give us a roadmap to answer the questions we need to go. Because as we think about this market, one thing we know for sure, and from our experience, it's not going to be perfect. We're not going to be perfect from the start. We're going to have to iterate and learn and work together to get there, and incorporate community feedback, make changes, and try out new strategies. And that's what this whole hydrogen market development strategy is about. If you go to the next slide, there's a QR code, so I think you should be able to use your phone. These will be posted here. But there are two websites. So one of them is our hydrogen website at GO-Biz. We haven't put a ton of meat to those bones, but I did want to throw out, we have a survey here on the hydrogen market development strategy. It's our input form. And if you use the QR code or click on the link, you can go in there, and there's a series of questions, kind of open-ended, but it helps us as a collective, better understand kind of where you are. What questions do you want to have answered in this? What are your concerns? What do you see as key opportunities? And then in there, you can put your email address. We can follow up. We have a mailing list we like to call Hydrogen on the Move. So we'll start using that again more to keep information flowing out. All of this in concert with all of our agency partners who are here today, and in the context of this 1075 report and IPR and everything else that's going on, PUC's proceedings, there's plenty. And then finally, just kind of if you go to the next slide, that's one thing that's clear and we've learned in California is like we need partnership to succeed. And so it takes us all to get there. It's California for all. We have a very unique opportunity as a state to help set the pathway out and lead the way forward for the rest of the country. Throughout this whole ARCHES process, throughout the hydrogen market development strategy, our objective and goal is to collaborate, not just in California, but across all the markets to make sure that we are doing right by creating market opportunity that focuses investment on renewable hydrogen production and consumption, and the opportunity to use it as a tool to meet our climate objectives is tremendous. And I think we're really, in a lot of ways, just getting started. And so maybe with that, I will hand it back to Jaya, and we'll go from there.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Tyson, for that presentation about GO-Biz's ongoing work on hydrogen. Right now, we're going to have a public comment section for 15 minutes, followed by a break. So please raise your hands using the raise hand function in Zoom as described on the slide, and we'll call on you to speak. Carrie will be managing the public comment process, announcing each commenter's name and giving you permission to unmute yourself.
All right, thank you, Jaya, and hi, everyone. Again, this is Carrie Bylan from CARB. And as Jaya mentioned, I'll be managing the public comment period. We are a little early, so we might be able to extend our public comment period if there's a need to do so. So I am going to be calling on those with their hands raised. I will invite you to unmute, and then at that point you will need to unmute yourself to be able to speak and give your comment. We are going to be limiting comments to 3 minutes, so apologies in advance that I will be chiming in when you have about 30 seconds left to let you know that your comment period is concluding. So with that, our first commenter is Robert Perry. Robert, you should be able to unmute yourself and make your comment.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
I can, thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. My name's Robert Perry. I'm a consultant with Synergistic Solutions. And my primary comment is, I think one aspect of hydrogen that's not really discussed enough, it concerns the systemic benefits of incorporating hydrogen electrolysis into an energy system. When you incorporate hydrogen electrolysis into an energy system, regardless of scale, up or down the chain, it significantly increases the flexibility of that system, allowing it to fully maximize the potential generation while significantly reducing and eliminating the possibility of curtailment. Prime example would be offshore wind. If you had co-located electrolysis, you could really build out the offshore wind generation so that during periods of low energy production, that added capacity will ensure reliable delivery of energy through transmission lines, whereas during most of the year, during normal operating conditions, that excess, quote unquote, excess would be used for hydrogen electrolysis. I heard a reference to people wanting to dedicate generation to hydrogen electrolysis independent of the broader system. I think we should avoid that at all costs because it forecloses on that opportunity. I think we need to keep, generation tied to electrolysis in the system so that the overall system can be fully flexible and reliably deliver direct electrification, which is really the highest and best use. Finally, hydrogen blending, hydrogen burning, these really need to be avoided at all costs because blending the amount of carbon emissions reductions is a small fraction the actual amount of hydrogen that's blended into the system. Burning creates NOx, which is
30 seconds.
Okay, NOx, which is as damaging as releasing CO2. So please, let's keep in mind what the systemic benefits that hydrogen can bring to our system. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Next, we will go to Julia Levin. I have unmuted you, and you should be able to unmute yourself and begin your comment.
Good morning, and thank you. This is Julia Levin with the Bioenergy Association of California. I really want to thank the Air Board and GO-Biz for your leadership on this incredibly important and exciting issue. I was thrilled to see the slides, both from the Air Board and GO-Biz, that include biogenic sources. And I want to underscore something that Tyson Eckerly said, and that is that we should be leveraging hydrogen to help meet our climate goals. And hydrogen from biogenic resources is really the only form that can significantly reduce short-lived climate pollutants, the most urgent thing we need to do for the climate. And it's also the only form of hydrogen that can provide carbon negative emissions, which we need to reach carbon neutrality. So I just want to applaud you and thank you and support your definition of renewable hydrogen, which includes hydrogen from organic waste and biogas. The other thing I wanted to mention is in Tyson's presentation, he talked about the use of hydrogen, at least in the near term, in both turbines and fuel cells. And I would like I would urge you to add linear generators and any other non-combustion technology in addition to fuel cells. But I also want to underscore the importance, at least in the near term, of using hydrogen in turbines. We have a desperate need for clean, firm power in California, and there are a lot of existing gas turbines that can be used for that could be using renewable fuels like renewable hydrogen and biogas. Unfortunately, there's legislation right now, AB 1373, that was amended over the weekend that would ban the use of any combustion, even when it's combustion of very clean carbon negative fuels like hydrogen or biogas from organic waste. So I just wanted to alert the Air Board and GO-Biz to AB 1373 because I think it contradicts what Tyson was recommending in the near term for energy reliability. So again, thank you for all your work on this. It's really exciting and really important.
All right, thank you, Julia. Our next speaker is Stephen Rosenblum. You should be able to unmute yourself and give your comment.
Yeah, hi, my name is Stephen Rosenblum. I'm a member of Climate Action California, and I'd like to thank you for this interesting presentation. I had 3 points I wanted to make, and I think the whole approach is very optimistic about success, and I think success is built on reliability. We can't build these huge systems with flammable gas, explosive materials, high pressures, and without worrying about reliability. So my first concern is about pipelines and hydrogen embrittlement, about the possible failure of pipes, about the failure of valves and pressure relief systems, about detecting leaks of hydrogen, which is, as we know, flammable and explosive in mixtures, and also a climate pollutant that it reacts with hydroxyl radicals, which are responsible for destroying methane. So if we leak hydrogen, we're actually increasing global warming. So we have to make sure that we're not shooting ourselves in the foot by creating a problem we don't know about. So I urge CARB and the agencies to really look carefully at these issues of hydrogen leakage and pipeline safety. The second thing I'd like to emphasize is the importance of carbon-free hydrogen. There's been a lot of discussion. We just heard from Julia Levin about why she thinks biogenic sources are a good idea. But remember, biogenic sources have carbon in them. And carbon doesn't care whether it's been in the ground for 1,000 years or one day. When it gets in the atmosphere, its lifetime is the same. Carbon capture and storage has not worked reliably at scale anywhere in the world yet. So I think it's very foolish to expect that we'll solve this problem in the next 5 years on a mass scale. And so I think that needs to be looked at. I think for the long term, CARB needs to really concentrate on carbon-free sources of hydrogen and not consider biogenic sources for the long term. And also biogenic sources have a lot of pollution associated with them. Burning woody biomass, methane from landfills
30 seconds.
Or agriculture have noxious emissions associated with them. And finally, I'd just like to go along with the comments by Robert, I'm sorry, I've forgotten his name, who talked about non-combustion sources. I think NOx emission is always associated with combustion of materials in the atmosphere, and it's a serious pollutant as well as a health risk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. And our next commenter is Beverly Deschaux. You should be able to unmute yourself and give your comment. Beverly, are you able to unmute? My system shows that you're unmuted, so you can give your comment if you are available. Okay, we'll go on to the next commenter. Beverly, you can leave your hand up and we can come back to you later.
I had to unblock. Was I able to unblock it?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm getting this. Excuse me, sorry.
I'm going to mute you for 1 second. It sounds like maybe you're on through another means. If you're able to disconnect the other connection to the webinar, we'll try one more time, and if not, I'll come back to you at the end.
Hello.
Yeah, we're still getting the echo, so we'll come back to you, okay?
Okay.
All right, next we'll go to Mick Skavarla. Mick, you should be able to unmute.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Mikhail Skavarla. I'm here on behalf of the California Hydrogen Coalition and the California Hydrogen Business Council. I want to extend our appreciation to staff for putting together this workshop today. I think I had a quick question, but I'm not sure we're doing that on this for this workshop. So in kind of a general statement, as we look towards carbon neutrality, as we look towards our SB 100 goals, the role that hydrogen can play as the mortar within the system to bring all of these pieces together is important. And I think as we go down the road on the 1075 proceeding, I think, to the extent that we can examine how an integrated hydrogen system works with our energy system as opposed to setting hydrogen separate and apart. And I think we've heard a couple commenters mention that, but also as part of our decarbonization system, which I believe the scoping plan did look at, but as we look across other policy spaces and to our to the legislature, making sure that we're integrating positive policy that brings these things together. So as we're looking at regionalization and as we're looking at centralized procurement, the role that hydrogen can play in offsetting potential risks of over procurement and curtailment, lowering the kind of impact to the ratepayer in that regard are all important pieces to bring to light through this proceeding. And then additionally, the role of off-takers in this production. It's one thing to put a lot of effort into the various pathways to produce renewable and decarbonized hydrogen, all of which we're supportive of. But we need to support the end users who create that demand. And I believe Arches has done a good job at that. But we currently have existing demand in these kind of new offtake spaces with fuel cells that could be better supported. And I believe that, you know, as we go down this 1075 work and with the work with GO-Biz, to the extent that we can bring all of these pieces together to support positive policy and maybe correct some of the issues like SB 149 that specifically excluded hydrogen projects, you know, to help enable us to drive towards that future in 2030 and 2045. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comment.
Oh.
All right, next we'll go to Alexandra McGee. You should be able to unmute.
Yeah, good morning. Wonderful. Thank you so much. So my name is Alexandra McGee. I'm with MCE. We're the first community choice aggregator in California. And I just wanted to say it's exciting to be here. It feels like early days for a really profound market transformation. So I just wanted to share some thoughts from the CCA perspective. And wanted to particularly focus on the preference for only new resources for grid supplied electrolytic hydrogen. I understand the preference is to use new resources so as to not displace existing renewables. Just wanted to flag we have a very long interconnection queues right now. So depending only on new resources might hinder or make the timeline a bit more vulnerable. So if it's possible, I'd encourage the agencies here to consider maybe a tiered or graduated pathway that would allow for current resources to be used in the near term, current solar or wind, while we find ways to ease the infrastructural challenges on the grid. And related to that, maybe on a parallel track, if we are going to be successful in creating a market for electrolytic hydrogen, I think we would benefit from a coordinated effort from the load-serving entities who already have curtailed renewables that they're working with in their portfolio. I know we would benefit personally from some technical support to determine how to capture the value of these resources, where sometimes, you know, the value is zero or in other cases negative. And then we could capture those resources to provide electrolytic hydrogen. And I know it's part of the plan. It just feels like a smaller part of the plan. So personally would raise my hand to that would benefit from some support around how we can tap into curtailed energy as a source to support this hydrogen development. And then finally, just flagging, we haven't talked about something this morning, which is the need to swap out current hydrogen production with clean hydrogen, largely in the industrial sector. I know that in working with local environmental justice advocates, that a lot of the concern is about cleaning up existing fossil fuel-based hydrogen, possibly where gray hydrogen has been used as a chemical feedstock, and prioritizing the swapping of that with green hydrogen instead. So those are comments from the CCA perspective. Just wanted to thank the staff again for pulling together an excellent workshop, and I'm excited to work with everyone to make this a reality.
Okay, thank you, Alexandra. Next, we will go to Alex Spataru. Sorry if I pronounced your name wrong, but you should be able to unmute and give your comment.
Hi there. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I commend CARB for putting this thing together. It's wonderful. Thank you. I have a comment and I have a quick question. The comment is echoes pretty much what Alexandra said, is in terms of, has there been an evaluation of the impact of the infrastructure, whether the new sources of hydrogen are mandated or we can just tier in gradually new green hydrogen or clean hydrogen while still allowing traditionally manufactured hydrogen to slowly be sunsetted out so we can maximize the development of the infrastructure. So what I'm looking for is, has there been a study that evaluates the two scenarios and does not present value of that? The other question, the comment that I have has to do with the work that's done by Tyson Eckerly. That was very nice. I want to thank him for the presentation. In that presentation, there were listed 232 port cargo handling equipment. We're currently, I teach at UCLA as well, and we're doing a survey of the ports in California. And I believe it, from initial indications, seemed to be that 232 cargo handling equipment pieces on hydrogen is a pretty modest figure compared to what is likely to happen. So that may be worthwhile to be revisited. Thank you very much for the time.
All right, thank you for your comment. And just to go back to Alexandra's comment, I just wanted to make sure, it sounded from your comment that you were aware that SB 1075 specifically calls out that we should analyze the possibility or the potential to use curtailed electricity to generate hydrogen. So we will definitely be including that as part of the 1075 work. Did I see anybody else from the panelist side that wanted to weigh in?
Oh, yeah, Carrie, if this is Tyson, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, great. So I agree. Yeah, we have to absolutely what he just said. And then also just for kind of for the last speaker from UCLA, that 232 numbers are just the pieces of equipment that have co-funding from the federal government. We expect that market to be much larger. So we're definitely in agreement.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yes, I didn't say it at the beginning, but if panelists want to jump in and comment or respond to any of the commenters, please feel free to do so. Moving on to our next commenter, Connie Conway. You should be able to unmute and provide your comment.
Good morning. It is still morning, I hope. And hopefully I'm unmuted myself. This has been very interesting. I have to tell you, I'm a retired legislator and congresswoman, so I'm very interested in all of this, and especially the legislative process. And I appreciate all the information that we've gotten this morning. My question is pretty quick and easy. What about new technologies? I mean, I'm aware of some new things that are out there available that would eliminate a lot of the angst that would tremendously serve disadvantaged communities. Is there room for any of that in this? We weren't part of the scoping process, but this new technology exists. And what is the process for getting some, being able to get our technology in front of people to become a new pathway, if you will, very clean hydrogen, very earth friendly. So that's my question, and maybe it can be answered by one of the panelists or not. But I'm just thinking down the road as this develops. It's amazing to me and wonderful, and I want to know what would be next steps for someone who is really on the forefront.
Connie, this is Tyson with GO-Biz. I'll just jump in. Like, new technologies are always welcome. I think that's what's one of the most exciting parts of this. We're just kickstarting the market, so to speak. So absolutely. I think you can reach out to any of the agencies for that. From a business development perspective, GO-Biz is a natural place. And with a hydrogen strategy, even on that survey, if you don't mind putting something in, that'd be really helpful. But it'd be great for, the analysis team at 1075 to be aware. But yeah, I think, that's where it starts to get really exciting. We've seen lots of innovation in batteries, for example, given the market there, and we expect the same on hydrogen.
Oh, it's amazing. And thank you, Tyson. And I will find you.
Great.
and,
Great.
And you will help me.
Yeah, that sounds great.
All right.
Thank you
so much. Thanks.
All right, thank you. And just to emphasize, we would welcome any feedback via our written comment period. It will be open shortly after this workshop and on our SB 1075 webpage here at CARB. And it will be open for 2 weeks. So we welcome written comment from all participants. Okay, next we will move to Faraz Rizvi. You should be allowed to unmute yourself and provide your comment.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Faraz Rizvi, and I'm here with APEN, Asian Pacific Environmental Network, where we represent refinery communities in the Bay Area and also in areas such as South LA, Wilmington, South Bay. And I just really wanted to highlight a number of environmental justice concerns that I think are not really being raised, and a number of them are, I think, particularly the issues around VOCs that happen with hydrogen, and especially with biogas hydrogen. We're still seeing issues with upstream and downstream emissions from biogas factory farm production as well, and then turning it into hydrogen through steam methane reformation or other methods can continue to release toxins into the environment. I think the gentleman who spoke, a few people before me, was really apt in mentioning that hydrogen can also be a greenhouse gas if it interacts with other organic compounds such as ozone. And there needs to be specific stringent protections around the storage and delivery infrastructure that's built around hydrogen. And so I think one of the things that we've continued to raise as we've engaged in any piece around hydrogen, whether it be through the legislation, through regulatory agencies, or through ARCHES as well, is that any hydrogen that's going to be moving forward needs to have community consent and community education around what the potential impacts are. And I think that's something to raise, and especially within this framework and in this study that's kicked off by 1075, to have some space for the environmental justice concerns around hydrogen deployment. Because there are lots of concerns around it. There are lots of concerns around pollution and toxins from anything that's not electrolytic green hydrogen. There's concerns from the biogas piece. And I think to pretend that biogas is neutral or clean for the environment is not true and based on really faulty assumptions. And so want to leave just with really raising the environmental justice concerns around this hype for hydrogen that doesn't really look at the reality of the folks on the ground who are going to be at the front lines of this new infrastructure we're building. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comment. Next, we will go to Jamie Randolph. You should be able to unmute and provide your comment.
Good morning. Thank you, Carrie and Tyson, for your excellent presentations today. I'm with Pacific Gas and Electric Company, and I am the Principal Hydrogen Program Manager there. I just wanted to say thank you for the work that you're all doing in this. PG&E supports building a statewide strategy to develop the hydrogen economy, and we'd love to participate with you and continue to be involved. We bring expertise and a vision on how to incorporate hydrogen into the utility sector, and we want to help to decarbonize the hard-to-electrify customers and support both the gas and electric systems with how hydrogen can serve our communities and meet California's climate goals. We do need state support to accelerate the pace of the work that needs to be done to develop the hydrogen economy and keep the utility rates affordable. So we're excited to see Governor Newsom's announcement that's coming out, and we're dedicated to innovation and bringing solutions to the table that can meet the needs of California. PG&E is active in ARCHES network, as Tyson knows, and in the California Hydrogen Business Council. And we're looking for state support on our hydrogen projects, including our Hydrogen to Infinity project, so we can close these knowledge gaps and understand how to safely put hydrogen through the existing infrastructure so that we can take it from producer to end user. And we think this is a critical step to making the hydrogen economy future a reality in California. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comment. We have, let's see, about 6 more minutes and 3 folks still with their hands raised. So hopefully we can get through to everybody. If we aren't able to call on you before we break, we will have another public comment period at the end of the workshop. But for now, let's go back to Beverly Deschaux. I am going to unmute you. You can unmute and provide your comment.
Hi, thank you for coming back to me. Seems like I signed in twice accidentally. My name is Beverly Deschaux. I'm with the Electric Vehicle Association of the Central Coast. We have 100 chapters across the United States. One thing that I'd like to know is you're speaking as if green hydrogen, clean hydrogen is already being produced. Who's producing it? I don't know of anyone who's producing it to scale. And in a recent presentation by Professor Saban of Cambridge, he said that if we were to go and try to scale up using renewable energy, we would cannibalize all renewables that are already in production just to produce hydrogen. And when we're producing hydrogen, the process goes, we produce the hydrogen using that clean energy, then we compress it or freeze it, ship it across our roads, which is highly explosive, or our rails, and then we take it and put it into stations, and people fuel up their vehicles with and use the fuel cell that also required energy to produce, only to turn it back into electricity that could have been used directly to use the vehicle that's charged by electricity and using the battery directly. So it's essentially using 4 times the amount of energy to produce hydrogen to run a vehicle. We have Tesla semis right now that are using electric. They have a 500-mile range. They can carry 82,000 pounds. We do not need it for medium and heavy-duty transport. There are now some batteries being developed that will address the industrial sector. I don't understand how it's carbon neutral. Right now, my figures show that 95% of hydrogen is being produced from natural gas. Natural gas is from fracking, and it has 120 to 80 times the heating capacity of CO2 because it's 75% methane. It's methane. And so I really don't know how why this whole process is even taking place, that we need to go to hydrogen. We already have an infrastructure for electricity. To
30 seconds.
To build out this whole other infrastructure does not make sense. It is delaying our decarbonization. It is delaying our addressing the climate emergency. I really would like the answer of who it is that you're saying is producing this green hydrogen. Thank you.
So this is Rajinder. I'm back online, and I want to make sure I respond to that question because there's a lot in there. There's also a lot of incomplete information and probably some information that needs to be fact-checked. And I think the 1075 process is a really good public process to make sure that we go through and actually put the real facts out there about the need for hydrogen, the way to produce hydrogen, and the way that we need to think about the electricity system and biomethane, that it needs to be addressed under 1383. There is no electricity grid that is in place today or will be in place in the near term to produce all the hydrogen that we need using only renewables. That math doesn't work out. It simply isn't there. And when you think about all the other electrification for buildings and simple boilers, residential, commercial, the heat pumps, it's not going to be there for a bit. When we think about all the electrification for light duty vehicles and medium and heavy duty, we are going to need hydrogen. And 1383, another statute, requires us to make sure that we address methane emissions, fugitive emissions from dairies, landfills, and other sources. And we have to absolutely make sure that we capture that methane and we put it into a use to displace fossil. Biomethane is another viable and important part of actually making renewable hydrogen at the quantities that the state is going to need, and at the quantities that we estimated when we did the modeling for the scoping plan. So the 1075 process will be a really good deep dive to making sure that we get the facts back out there again. We highlight the work that was being done at the other agencies, we highlight the science, and we highlight all of the work that was done in the scoping plan in 2022. So look forward to having you in that conversation, but there is no way that we can have only electrolytic hydrogen to meet our demands in the near term or the next few decades. We have to think about other feedstocks such as biomethane. Thanks. Carrie or Jaya, I think we're going to break now.
Okay. Yep. Thank you, Rajinder, for that. And thank you very much to all the commenters. There are a couple folks that we haven't been able to get to, so I apologize. Hopefully you can stay on and provide your comment at the next comment period. Otherwise, we are welcoming comments through our written comment period that will be open for 2 weeks following this workshop. So we are going on a break, and we will resume at 10:35. Thank you very much, everyone.
Hi all, glad to see everyone back from the break. The next presentation as part of this workshop will be from Simon Baker, Director of Distributed Energy Resources, Natural Gas and Retail Rates and Energy Division at the California Public Utilities Commission, about their ongoing programs and studies related to hydrogen.
Hello, good morning, everyone. As noted, I'm Simon Baker. I'm a director in the Energy Division of the California Public Utility Commission. And we appreciate this opportunity to share about what we're doing in the hydrogen space as implemented through our regulation of the state's investor-owned utilities. Next slide, please. We're currently focused in two main areas. First, we recently considered SoCalGas's proposal to develop a green hydrogen energy pipeline transportation system from unspecified production sources to serve hard to electrify industries and heavy duty transportation in the Los Angeles basin. This is the so-called Angeles Link application. And secondly, we're reviewing proposals from SoCalGas, SDG&E, and Southwest Gas to pursue pilot projects to inject clean renewable hydrogen into the existing methane pipeline system in small amounts to better understand the real world safety and operational impacts. And this is to lay the groundwork for further understanding what a system-wide safe hydrogen injection standard might look like. Next slide, please. The Angeles Link application filed by SoCalGas was the first instance of a utility seeking to record costs for a possible infrastructure project dedicated to hydrogen in California. And SoCalGas filed that application on February 17th of last year. They proposed to perform 3 phases of work. In phase 1, totaling $26 million, they would conduct initial assessments over a period of about 12 to 18 months. In phase 2, totaling $92 million, they would conduct refined design, engineering, and environmental studies over a period of 18 to 24 months. And in phase 3, they would make final refinements, go through permitting, and submit regulatory applications over a period of 18 to 30 months. And the cost estimates for this phase of work were, as stated by them, in the hundreds of millions of dollars. In December of last year, the PUC approved SoCalGas to move forward with phase 1 feasibility studies with certain stipulations. We granted SoCalGas the authority to establish what's called a memorandum account to record the costs of performing phase 1 feasibility studies for the project up to a cap of 26 million with an option for an increase of up to 15%. And the decision also directed SoCalGas to join California in its ARCHES application for federal funding and to study the feasibility of a localized clean renewable hydrogen hub solution in the LA basin. And this is in addition to the system-wide hub that the company had initially proposed. Importantly, the approval of a memorandum account only means that the company may record these costs, which may or may not be approved for future cost recovery from ratepayers following the conclusion of phase 1. Basically, the company needs to make a reasonableness showing on the recovery of those costs. And there's no guarantee that the Angeles Link project will ever be built. That's subject to the findings of the feasibility study and further review by the commission. Next slide, please. Since that decision, SoCalGas has proceeded with phase 1, the goal of which is to produce refined supply, demand, pipeline configuration, and storage analyses to support a pre-front-end energy engineering and design analysis. And this entails a refined assessment of expected green hydrogen demand and identification of initial and subsequent end users in the LA basin, a refined assessment of potential sources of green hydrogen production to meet the identified demand, together with the preliminary environmental impact analyses, a preliminary study of hydrogen storage options to facilitate system operability, processing, and reliability, the development of a plan to address safety requirements applicable to the project, a high-level risk assessment and analysis of ability to permit, a high-level economic analysis, stakeholder meetings and engagement, a preliminary routing analysis, and finally, the specification of pipeline sizing and design criteria. Again, all of this is expected to be completed in 12 to 18 months, so we expect completion by sometime next year. Next slide. Some of the relevant aspects to consider about the proposed Angeles Link project include the anticipated costs, which they do not include any of the future construction or capital costs. Any such proposal to construct an actual project would need to be submitted via future application to the CPUC. Also, the project would not use the existing gas infrastructure. It would build on a new pipeline system, a dedicated system for that purpose. The main goal of the project is to develop a clean, renewable hydrogen energy transportation system, likely from multiple local and, in the longer term, regional clean hydrogen production sources to displace the use of natural gas in the LA basin. And the project seeks to bring clean, renewable hydrogen to support current and future hydrogen end uses, including hard to electrify industries, electric generation, and heavy duty transportation sectors. The project also seeks to provide a resilient energy source as more intermittent generation is added to the grid. Next slide, please. So current status is that SoCalGas is currently working with dozens of planning advisory group members and also community-based organizations to explore possible pipeline routing, end-use customers, production sources, project costs, and other relevant issues. Looking forward, the PUC sees several key considerations that must be addressed. First is the question of how should hydrogen transportation be regulated moving forward. This is an entirely undefined space. Policymakers have not yet determined whether hydrogen transportation should be regulated in a manner similar to natural gas. And the existing hydrogen pipeline system is not currently regulated as a public utility service. How hydrogen is regulated will ultimately determine who will pay for its transportation, in addition to how it is permitted and how the system safety is ensured. Secondly, what will the hydrogen market actually look like in the future? The report that was ordered in this process will inform what role hydrogen will play in California's clean energy future. And other legislation and agency work will be needed to further refine future plans for the use of hydrogen. And finally, how should hydrogen be delivered and stored? It's not yet certain to what extent hydrogen should be transported via pipeline, like natural gas, versus trucked, like gasoline. And future end uses will determine how best to meet the needs of end use customers who are hard to electrify while remaining cost competitive in the long term. Next slide, please. Turning to our work on hydrogen blending, we did some foundational work by commissioning a study through the University of California, Riverside. The PUC released a UC Riverside-led hydrogen blending impact study in July of 2022 and solicited party comments on its findings. The project analyzed the viability of blending hydrogen with natural gas in California's existing natural gas infrastructure. The study addressed safety concerns associated with injecting hydrogen at various percentages. Based on the study's findings, the PUC issued a December 2022 decision directing SDG&E, SoCalGas, PG&E, and Southwest Gas to further study hydrogen blending to better understand real-world safety and operational impacts before adopting a system-wide hydrogen injection standard. In response to that decision, California's large gas IOUs will revise their proposals filed in September of last year to reflect the new requirements specified by the PUC. And PG&E will be brought into that application despite not initially being part of that process. Next slide, please. So what did the UC Riverside study find? The main recommendation of the study is to conduct real-world demonstration projects between 0.1 to 5% by volume injection and 5 to 20% hydrogen blending to address safety and performance issues in California's pipelines. The study concludes that determining a single injection standard would have to consider the most susceptible conditions observed throughout all the infrastructure. And this system-wide blending injection scenario becomes potentially concerning as hydrogen blending approaches 5% by volume. The body of literature reports that in relatively low hydrogen concentrations, so talking about like 1 to 5% by volume, blending seems to be viable without significantly increasing risk factors in the storage, transportation, and utilization of hydrogen blends. The study highlights the potential for pipeline embrittlement and gas leakage at increasing volumes of hydrogen injected above that 5% level, particularly. Next slide, please. In September of last year, SoCalGas, SDG&E, and Southwest Gas filed applications for hydrogen blending demonstration projects. And PG&E opted to pursue a different project separately called the Hydrogen to Infinity project. As a point of reference, a previous iteration of a similar application was dismissed without prejudice by the PUC in 2021, pending further research. So then in December of 2022, the PUC decision spoken to earlier ordered all 4 of the gas utilities to refine their approach to hydrogen blending and to submit new or amended pilot programs within 2 years to test hydrogen blending ranges from 0.1% to 20%. And specifically, ordering paragraph of that decision establishes 12 distinct criteria for future pilot programs related to safety, cost, methodology, and stakeholder engagement. These are shown on the right-hand side of the slide here, and they include things like ensuring long-term safety of the pipeline system, using testing protocols consistent with the UC Riverside study, evaluating hydrogen blends between 0 to 5% and 5 to 20%, and taking stakeholder input into account. Next slide, please. We thought it would be of interest to see some of the specifics of the projects that the IUs proposed in their September applications. Again, these are subject to change as the IUs refine their proposals in response to PUC direction. Nevertheless, this reflects what California's 4 large utilities are currently interested in piloting to better understand blending's impacts. As you can see from the table, SoCalGas wants to study an isolated portion of the medium pressure distribution system up to 20% blending focused on commercial and residential end use equipment. And they also want to study an open portion of the distribution system up to 5% blending. SDG&E wants to study an isolated portion of the distribution system up to 20% blending focused on fuel cells. Similarly, Southwest Gas wants to study an isolated portion of the distribution system focused on commercial end-use equipment. And finally, PG&E wants to study hydrogen blending up to 30% by volume on an isolated standalone and new transmission system focused on power plant and fueling stations. Next slide, please. As previously noted, the utilities are currently retooling these pilot programs and will present their revised pilots for PUC consideration in the 4th quarter of this year in that same application proceeding in which they previously submitted proposals. And PG&E will be brought into that proceeding despite not being part of the initial filing. Looking forward, PUC sees several key considerations that must be addressed regarding hydrogen blending. First is the question of whether the injection of hydrogen into the methane system is a good environmental solution. The PUC, research institutions, gas utilities, and other stakeholders will need to assess the extent to which clean, renewable hydrogen can help California decarbonize. Special attention will need to be given to whether and to what extent hydrogen should be procured vis-a-vis biomethane, as well as how to ensure that such procurement doesn't undermine building electrification efforts. Secondly, is whether the risk is worth the reward. Additional testing is necessary to determine whether embrittlement risks and leakage concerns are small enough to merit procurement and injection of hydrogen without posing any undue risk to the public. And finally, how to test scenarios and translate that to the broader system impact. It remains to be seen to what extent testing on small closed loop segments of the gas distribution system translate into broader system-wide injections and usage applications. Next slide, please. And finally, whenever we talk about hydrogen, the question of definitions comes up. So of necessity, the PUC needed to define hydrogen for purposes of the Angeles Link project, if it were to ever be built, and the hydrogen blending pilots, if they're approved. Both the Angeles Link project and the hydrogen blending pilots are required to transport only clean, renewable hydrogen. And the way that we currently define that is hydrogen which is produced through a process that results in the life cycle or well-to-gate greenhouse gas emissions rate of not greater than 4 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per kilogram of hydrogen produced, and does not use fossil fuel as either a feedstock or production energy source. The term fossil fuel is consistent with the definition found in the Public Utility Code section 2806. The prohibition on the use of fossil fuel does not apply to an eligible renewable energy source that uses a de minimis quantity of fossil fuel as allowed under the Public Utilities Code section 399. Our approach was intended to align with the current direction of federal incentive activity related to hydrogen, and future refinement of this eligibility standard will be considered following the issuance of the 1075 report. That concludes my planned remarks, and I will also note that I included some additional information in the appendix to the deck, which stakeholders may wish to review. Again, thanks for the opportunity to present.
Thank you, Simon, for your presentation about the CPUC's ongoing work on hydrogen. Our next panelist will be David Earn, the Deputy Director of the Energy Assessments Division at the California Energy Commission, discussing their ongoing work and research related to hydrogen.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to be giving an overview today of analysis and content that will actually be part of a full-day workshop that we have on hydrogen on this Friday, and I'll talk a little bit more about that workshop and the content of that workshop. Next slide. So first of all, let me talk about what CEC's requirements are relative to 1075. In addition to what CARB is responsible for, CEC is to conduct an analysis and include that in this year's IPER, Integrated Energy Policy Report, and the Integrated Energy Policy Report in 2025. The scope of our analysis is to study and model potential growth in the law calls for green hydrogen. We're saying renewable hydrogen for both the electric sector and the transportation sector. So we're interpreting that as power generation and transportation sectors for our analysis. This year, we may be expanding that to a broader scope in 2025. Next slide. On Friday, we'll be going through this in much more detail, but we took a couple different strategies for our analysis for this year's IPER. For the power generation side, we chose two scenarios. We looked at replacing gas in using the SB 100 core scenario and also the scoping plan scenario for 2045. Evaluated the need for hydrogen to replace gas in those situations. Looked at the production, storage, transportation of hydrogen to meet those needs. Discussed the challenges associated with those and the opportunities. And we'll be presenting those preliminary results on Friday. And we also note that this is a preliminary analysis, and more detailed analysis will be happening in the next phase in the 2025 IPER. And that will be benefited by the fact that we will have done much more robust analysis more broadly on reliability and the electric system for SB 100. So the next SB 100 report is due in January of 2025. For that, we're doing a much more robust reliability analysis, and we'll be looking at potential for hydrogen and other firm zero carbon resources to provide support to the state through that process. That analysis will help identify some additional opportunities to dig deeper, and we'll be providing those in the 2025 IPER report for 1075. On the transportation side, we utilized our 2022 IPER freight and truck choice model. This covers Class 6 and Class 8 trucks. Under that, we looked at updating the pricing for those vehicles, and also updated some different pricing scenarios for hydrogen in the future, and then modeled the count of vehicles that would be on the road, and also the hydrogen demand associated with that. So that's the analysis we did on the transportation side. Again, we'll go into more detail about inputs, assumptions, the overall analysis, and what we have preliminary results we've received from that analysis on Friday's workshop. So next slide. I'm also going to talk through our research in this area. There's a lot of work to be done to continually improve our opportunities relative to hydrogen. We have 2 R&D programs that provide support to hydrogen-related topics. Our Electric Program Investment Charge, EPIC, and our Gas R&D program both provide funding that came from electric and natural gas ratepayers that provide support to funding that goes to R&D. So far, CEC has funded over $45 million in active and planned investments around hydrogen. Historically, this has been mostly around the vehicle fleet, but we're expanding it over the recent years to cover many more topics than just the vehicle fleet. So for the transportation applications, we have research going on in rail and marine for ports, improving truck and bus technologies, and also refueling infrastructure for heavy transport. All of that adds up to over $20 million in R&D support for that area. On the production side, we're looking at renewable hydrogen production, looking at non-electrolysis options there. And then for transportation and storage, we have multiple projects related to hydrogen blending and opportunities and challenges associated with that. Large volume hydrogen storage, blending for power generation, and some broader large hydrogen storage projects. So we're expanding the analysis that we're doing or the research that we're funding to get more information about opportunities to improve and continually make hydrogen more available and at lower cost for Californians. Let me just go to the final slide, which is our September 8th workshop. So again, this is kind of a teaser for Friday. We'll be covering all of this content in much more detail. So for the morning session, we have commissioners from CPUC, CEC participating on the dais, giving an overview of their philosophy and their thinking about this topic. We have a number of setting the stage presentations. So this includes environmental groups as well as other agencies that are providing a perspective on where hydrogen stands right now in the state of California and nationally, with speakers from NRDC, EDF, CARB, and GO-Biz presenting in the setting the stage session. We will then follow that with a CEC presentation that talks more detail about what I briefed on here today, which is our approach and the preliminary results from our analysis for the 1075 work in the IPER this year. That's the morning session. The afternoon session will include 2 different panels. The first panel will be on decarbonizing the power sector. We have presenters from Mitsubishi, PG&E, NCPA, SoCalGas, and SDG&E all presenting on different perspectives on decarbonizing power production in the state and things that are ongoing or planned for power production and the technologies necessary to do it. And then the panel after that is going to be talking about hydrogen adoption for decarbonizing the transportation sector, where we have presentations from the Port of LA, First Element Fuel, AC Transit, and Hyundai talking about transportation sector. So that's a pretty robust set of panels in the afternoon. We expect to have a pretty substantial overview of hydrogen opportunities for the state during that all-day session, and welcome all of you to join the IPER presentation, the IPER workshops for that day on Friday. So with that, we can go to my final slide. I'm just concluding and saying thank you and hope you'll join us on Friday for a much more detailed overview.
All right, thank you, David, for your presentation on the CEC's efforts around hydrogen. As per the agenda, we'll now begin another public comment section for originally scheduled for 20 minutes, but we might have a little extra time looking at the clock. Please raise your hands using the raise hand function in Zoom as on the slide and as before, and we'll call on you to speak. Carrie will be managing the public comment process, announcing each commenter's name and giving the commenter permission to unmute themselves.
Thank you, Jaya, and thanks so much to our speakers and to the folks attending for your participation. So as mentioned, we'll run this as we did the last one. In case folks weren't on for that one, I will be announcing the name of the commenter and unmuting them on my end, and then I will ask that person to unmute themselves to give their comments. We will be limiting comments to 3 minutes, and I will be giving you a 30-second warning when you have 30 seconds left of that 3 minutes. So apologies in advance that I will be maybe interrupting your comment. So first we will go to Jan Warren. You should be able to unmute and provide your comment.
Hi, I'm Jan Warren, and I'm with the Interfaith Climate Action Network of Contra Costa County. I first want to support the comments from Steve Rosenblum and from Beverly Deschaux at the first presentation. It seems like, you know, I followed the scoping plan and all of that, and you know, we're gonna do all this work like the CPU. I mean, like the gentleman from the CPUC just talked about, and just that project is going to take 5 years. And you're talking about this roadmap. I see it as a roadmap, and it was presented as, man, we're going to do all this in 5 years, and that's not a reality. The 3 kg tax credit is it was stated in the presentation, is a huge driver, and that entire presentation focused an awful lot on who's going to benefit. Those that get the money to make these. I don't have a clock on me. That's not good. And you talk about it being modeled after the ZEB policy approach. I didn't hear much about the community other they're going to get benefits. You know, they're going to get more jobs. But it seems to me that you're going to have all this figured out, and then you're going to go to the community. California owns only about 12,000 hydrogen-powered cars, compared with more than 760,000 powered by batteries. The truth is, hydrogen has made less than an ideal progress in making this market competitive compared to other zero-emission technologies. The state estimates it will need nearly 1.2 million chargers for batteries powered by cars by 2030, and only 88,000 are now installed. Most hydrogen is now produced using natural gas. Some companies are exploring ways of making hydrogen a green energy source by splitting water using renewable energy electrolyzers, but that technology remains much more costly than today's process using fossil fuels. I know this whole thing is to reduce the cost. To me, it's to keep the wonderful fossil fuel energy companies going strong and getting whatever money is thrown at by the government, which is really just taxpayer money. As
30 seconds.
3 seconds? Oh, no. Okay. Anyhow, I have heard from a legislator that there's lots of lobbyists at the legislature running around lobbying for the hydrogen. And we need to keep the proportion. It needs to be validated before you pour tons of money into it, because we're running out of time and let's go with what's already working in terms of the most of the money that we spend. Thank you.
So this is Rajinder. I just want to share a couple of observations again. You know, we're going to use the 1075 process to again get out the facts about what hydrogen is and isn't, the need for it, and the way to produce it, and how to transfer it across the state to the different end uses. I think the reason that you're seeing industry jump in right now is because there is a once-in-a-lifetime chance of federal incentive sitting out there It has taken decades to have the kind of money at the federal level that we are seeing today to be able to do some of the good things that we know we need to do. And I know you talked about how 5 years is a long time. Well, 5 years is a long time when the science says that we need to transition off of fossil fuels as much as possible by 2045. But we've got to start somewhere. If we're going to say no to solutions because they're going to take 5 years, we don't have other solutions to put on the table. Just in one of the reports recently, 45 states have enacted some kind of policy or requirement that has stifled renewable electricity generation across the US. So it's not about saying no to hydrogen and knowing that the electricity will be there. People are also saying no to electricity that is the renewable electricity, the good kind that we want. And that's before you even think about the math to how much electricity it's going to take to power the vehicles, all of our homes, small, simple industry, and then have enough sitting on the grid to also make renewable hydrogen. So there are some fundamental table setting that needs to happen here again on the facts of what's going on, and the 1075 process is the place to do that. We're going to work through all of these issues together and hope that you can be part of that conversation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Rajinder. Okay, next we will go to Linda Hutchins-Knowles. You should be able to unmute yourself and give your comment.
Yes, hi, thank you. I'm Linda Hutchins-Knowles. I live in San Jose. As a taxpayer, I'm really concerned about the amount of money that the state is investing in hydrogen technology, because it's much more efficient to use renewable energy directly to electrify transportation and buildings rather than using renewable energy to create through electrolysis hydrogen and then use that to power buildings and transportation. There's so much energy lost in that. It's very inefficient. And it makes no sense for the state to be investing so much, especially in light duty and medium duty transportation. That should be really off the table. The science does not support that as being a way to decarbonize transportation. Right now, the state is spending about $1 to $2 million to install hydrogen fueling stations. And for that amount of money, the state could put in 143 to 286 EV chargers for every hydrogen fuel pump you build. And so honestly, I don't think that fuel cell vehicles would actually have a market if it wasn't for the state propping up this industry and putting in hydrogen fueling. It's much more efficient, much better for the environment for the state to focus exclusively on electrifying transportation. And with new battery technology, solid state batteries, actually even long duty, heavy duty trucking is moving to viability for electricity. So as a taxpayer, I ask you to please discontinue propping up hydrogen fuel cell vehicles and instead invest that money in helping ensure that every resident of the state of California can get EV charging at home. This means a cross-agency approach that includes the Housing and Community Development Agency to move in this next triennial CalGreen Code to require that all new apartments and condos be built pre-wired for EV charging for every housing unit with parking. Also, I want to say that I hope that in your workshops that you're doing on Friday and in future workshops, that you will include experts such as the ones that spoke at the Climate Center's hydrogen workshop on August 30th. David Saban and Sasan Sadet gave excellent presentations about the very, very few use cases where it makes sense to use hydrogen. And I think it's very important that you don't let industry basically co-opt our public dollars into false greenwashing solutions. So there might be a role for hydrogen in very limited applications, but certainly there's not a role for it in light duty or heavy or medium duty transportation, and likely, as I said, not heavy duty. So also
30 seconds.
Okay, carbon capture and storage is also a way for the fossil fuel industry to continue its business of fossil fuel extraction and using that as an excuse, using carbon capture as an excuse to continue its fossil fuel extraction. As the state assembly has just validated the non-fossil fuel proliferation treaty, it behooves all of the California agencies to also look carefully and critically at the continued fossil fuel use and extraction. And carbon capture and sequestration is another one of the false and greenwashed climate solutions. Instead, we should be investing in natural sequestration, supporting the 30 by 30 plan to have 30% of our land be able to do natural carbon sequestration through wetlands and forests and natural agriculture. So thank you for listening, and please don't buy into the hype from industry. Spend our taxpayer dollars wisely and use this moment to make sure we're on track to a truly sustainable future. Thank you.
So I'm going to respond to this one because I think that we need to make sure that we as the state agency that did the scoping plan continue to put out the facts and the conversation that was had there. First, anything we do as state agencies is going to be in compliance with statutory direction from the legislature and any executive direction from the governor's office. Two, we're going to make sure that we can maximize dollars from the federal level so that costs for climate mitigation can be subsidized through federal dollars, not just through Californians and those of us that pay taxes in the state here. So we do want to be mindful of trying to leverage federal dollars and bring those back home to the state. And third, there is a continuum, a series of reports that have been coming out for over a decade with many, many scientists and many governments looking into the issue of hydrogen and the role it can play. And California is not going alone here. There are many governments, many other scientists out there and scientific agencies that see the role for hydrogen. In terms of the scaling for electrification for medium and heavy duty, those conversations were also had over the course of the last few years at the Air Resources Board. We are looking to be in compliance with energy sources for transportation with our regulations that push very, very hard to get us off of fossil fuels, to make sure that we're not combusting diesel and gasoline on our roadways and in the communities that have been bearing the disproportionate impact of air quality. If we're going to say no to these tools, and we're not going to have real solutions on the table that actually are feasible in the real world, then what we're saying is yes to the entrenched fossil fuel use in our communities and on our roadways. So we are looking for solutions to get off of fossil energy as quickly as possible. Someday we will get to all electrification, but that is not tomorrow. And saying that we're going to stick with fossil fuel tomorrow is not really an option that works for public health or for the environment. Thanks, Carrie.
Okay, thanks, Rajinder, and thanks to all of our commenters. Next, we will go to Robert Glass. You should be able to unmute yourself and provide your comment.
Yes, good morning. My name is Robert Glass with Daikin Comfort Technologies. The comments that I have are around the blending and gas distribution systems, and particularly for the use for residential and commercial applications. One of the things that need to be aware of is that at this point, CSA, Canadian Standards Association, who's the secretariat for all of the residential and light commercial safety standards for all gas appliances, they have gone on record at this point that all of the safety standards do not and will not recognize blended natural gas as a suitable fuel for appliances because the standards, well, the product have not been tested to variations. There are no standards that exist today for blended natural gas and what that blended natural gas is representative of, and the BTU content and other parameters around the natural gas itself. So just need to be aware that while there may be some pilots and things that are going on, the use of the blended natural gas with residential and light commercial natural gas products, that there will be challenges associated with that. I think the standards committees are starting to look at hydrogen blended natural gas and how that may have a part in safety standards that are moving forward, but that's not a quick process. It is something that could easily take 5 to 10 years in order to get standards for the natural gas developed, as well as standards for safety standards for all of the gas appliances and gas-fired products that are out there. So it is something that, while understanding the work that's being done up front and looking at pilots and things, I don't think that you can count on that until some of these other things are also addressed, and would encourage some of the groups within California that are pushing this to reach out and contact CSA as far as noting the desire to be able to expand the market to use hydrogen blended natural gas for residential and commercial applications.
30 seconds.
Thank you. That will help drive and push these changes that would be necessary within these standards to be able to go ahead and accomplish the end purpose here. So just wanted to go ahead and put that on the table. And if there's any questions about that, I'll be glad to go ahead and answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Our next speaker will be Miles Heller. You should be able to unmute and state your comment.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, CARB, for hosting, and the other agencies and participating in this workshop. This is Miles Heller with Air Products. Really appreciate the opportunity to comment. We've announced upwards of $15 billion in renewable and low carbon hydrogen projects worldwide. And so this is a very important issue to us. We appreciate the focus on renewable hydrogen, as well as a broader definition than just green electrolytic hydrogen. We'd encourage all of the agencies to continue to look for ways to encourage low carbon hydrogen, including carbon intensity reductions for gray hydrogen. In fact, gray hydrogen used directly in transportation today or to enable biofuel production can actually have beneficial emission reductions in the state. Gray hydrogen used in transportation today can afford zero tailpipe emissions if used in fuel cell vehicles in heavily impacted communities. So we'd urge the group to look for ways to encourage carbon intensity reductions, even in the gray hydrogen that's used today. We'd ask that you look at a technology neutral carbon intensity performance-based metric that will encourage these reductions for all production of hydrogen. Electricity is afforded a glide path today for carbon intensity reduction. We'd ask that you do the same for hydrogen, and any definitions and end use cases should recognize this transition, targeting near-term and long-term benefits as we all move toward a renewable hydrogen future. So we look forward to working with the agencies and being able to make additional comments in writing. Appreciate your time. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Next, we will have comments from Jared Ferguson. You should be able to unmute and provide your comments.
Perfect. Thank you for your time, ma'am. My name is Jared Ferguson with Ag Funding Assistance. I just wanted to call comment to hydrogen in the agriculture sector, specifically long truck hauling and produce and such like that. I did want to comment on the usability of moving hydrogen at 500 miles for transportation as opposed to the current vehicle that is available that is being driven by electric, which is only 200 miles. If we look at most truck drivers, they're paid on an hourly wage. So during refueling, they would not be able to stop, much less your produce would not be able to move down the road. So 500 miles is within the current range of approved driving. So drivers would be pulling off the road to refuel at that point in time anyway. But if your goal is to remove vehicles off of the road, then you're going to need something along the lines of hydrogen that can travel 500 miles. Anything that's at 200, for every vehicle that you want to travel with, you're going to need 3 as replacement. Being electric isn't going to offset the fact that you're going to need 3 vehicles to 1. If you want this to actually move forward in an industry manner where you would have people that are willing to accept, which truck drivers are willing to accept the vehicle so long as it works and it's going to move their trailer and it's going to allow them to make a living. The problem is like your produce during harvest season, trucks run 24 hours. So you need something like hydrogen that has a refueling rate, is comparable to gasoline and diesel, and doesn't have a charge time and a sit time of 8 hours. Currently, the California grid cannot handle the superchargers it would take to get a tractor trailer down to even a 2-hour range. Vehicles hauling perishables are not going to be able to sit for 2 hours if it's a hot day. They need to move. You have live animals on trailers and you have fresh produce on that need to be transported. So if you're truly trying to get something that's going to be implemented and be used in an industry that can currently use it and is on the road, we can't just look at smaller vehicles that have such a small travel radius. The United States runs on produce moving along its highways. So you need something that can travel that distance. If your electric can get there eventually, that's great. But currently hydrogen trucks are being produced and are in use and in training and having their tests done to be a usable market. Every truck on the road can be transferred out for a hydrogen truck as long as you can find a way to make it cheaper than diesel. Those are my comments. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. Next commenter is Stephen Rosenblum. You should be able to unmute and state your comment.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for my second chance to speak. I want to direct my comments at the talk by Simon Baker from the CPUC. I think the CPUC's responsibility in hydrogen, its number one responsibility should be system reliability and safety. They should not be beguiled by industry arguments about what they're contributing to decarbonization of our economy. As other speakers have pointed out, industry very often is talking out of the profit side of its mouth and trying to maximize its current income and not worried about what's going to happen 5 years from now. So I think that's the main thing I would like to say. The second thing, I'd like to put myself also in agreement with Robert Glass about hydrogen blending, but for different reasons. The discussion is about putting 5% hydrogen into methane, which means that the pipeline still is running 95% methane, which right now is made in California to about 95% of capacity from steam reforming of methane, which is a fossil fuel. So we're reducing our fossil fuel consumption by at most 5% if it's made with completely green hydrogen. If it's made with any kind of other color of hydrogen, then it's no net contribution at all. So I suggest we stop discussion of blending at all, and safety issues and suitability issues that Mr. Glass referred to are still of extreme importance, as I pointed out in my previous comments. Another thing that I have issue with is Mr. Baker's comment that truck hydrogen is like gasoline. It is not like gasoline. Gasoline is a liquid at room temperature. It's a flammable liquid, but it's still a liquid, and it can be transported in a normal tank truck that we see on the road every day. Hydrogen must be transported either a highly compressed gas in a tube trailer or as a liquefied gas at temperatures near absolute zero. So in neither case is it like gasoline. It's much different than gasoline. It has different safety issues, and those need to be considered if we're going to go to an economy where large amounts of hydrogen are moving on our roadways. So I think that also needs to be looked at. And then the final thing, which is more of a quibble, is the definition of clean hydrogen. What he described as 4 kilograms of carbon dioxide emission per kilogram of hydrogen is the minimum federal definition of clean hydrogen. And the lowest level was 0.25 or 0.45, I'm sorry, 0.45 kilograms of carbon dioxide per kilogram of hydrogen. I suggest that the PUC take that as a goal to force down their definition to the minimum federal requirement, not the maximum federal requirement. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Our next commenter will be Robert Perry. You should be able to unmute yourself and provide your comment.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And thank you for the presentations today. I particularly appreciate David Ernst's presentation that juxtaposes hydrogen's use in both power generation and transportation. And I'm very much looking forward to Friday's event. And I hope that at the event, there's a discussion concerning application of vehicle grid integration technologies to fuel cell vehicles. When most people talk about vehicle grid integration, the assumption is that we're limiting ourselves to battery electric vehicles, which is understandable. But fuel cell vehicles, particularly heavy duty ones, with an export capability, power export capability, can provide some critical services to grids during outages and during peak conditions. And I think we really need to start thinking about incorporating some kind of export function when designing these types of vehicles, because the extreme weather events we've been experiencing the last few years is just the edge of the storm that's coming. We really need to develop systems and infrastructures that intersect to maximize the degree of resiliency so that we can weather these types of events with minimal collateral damage. So again, let's think about vehicle grid integration for all vehicles, not just battery, but for all zero emission vehicles that are going to be coming online in the coming years. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Our next commenter will be Sarah Gerson. You should be able to unmute and state your comment.
Hi, good morning. This is Sarah Gerson. I am an attorney at Earth Justice, and I have two general areas I'd like to touch on. First, hydrogen production. I didn't hear a whole lot in the presentation about the SB 1075 mandate to consider air pollution and other environmental impacts from hydrogen. And I did hear comments about the potential environmental benefits of using hydrogen, but the impact, the harms from producing hydrogen in irresponsible ways will be felt in different locations from where the hydrogen is being used, and potentially reducing emissions from the end use sector. So I just want to emphasize the importance of looking at those two things separately to understand who is being harmed and how much by irresponsible hydrogen production. Second, on hydrogen uses, I think for any application, there's a really significant risk of throwing money at equipment that will wind up being stranded assets. And there's no area of the economy where that stranded asset risk and potential for waste is greater than when you're talking about hydrogen blending in the gas system. Mr. Baker noted projects they're contemplating blends up to, I think, 20%. That's a decarbonization, even if you're using truly green hydrogen, of at most 7% of the emissions from the gas sector. And there's no plausible solution for reducing the remaining 93% of emissions without just transitioning wholly to relying on clean electric solutions. And so I guess I want to make sure that there's a process in place to make sure that the 1075 report isn't going to recommend
30 seconds.
Using hydrogen in sectors where you quickly meet a dead end in terms of the ability of hydrogen to incrementally reduce emissions. And you need a completely different approach to truly transform the sector and reach our state climate policies. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. And just to point out that we will be looking at air quality, greenhouse gas, and other impacts. It is mentioned in CARB's presentation, which is on our website. And in particular, slide 17 mentions it because it is something that 1075 specifically asked for. So just to be clear, we definitely will be looking at air quality impacts, GHG impacts, and other analyses as directed in SB 1075. Let's see. So the next speaker or the next commenter is Beverly Deschaux. I'm going to unmute you and you can begin your comment.
Hi, thank you for taking my comment. Beverly Deschaux, President of the Electric Vehicle Association of Central Coast. Rajinder, I think that you misunderstood what I was saying about, anyway, I'm not saying, okay, the Marina landfill in California on the coast has been using its own biogas to run the entire facility, as well as to provide 10% of the water company's energy needs next door since the mid-'80s, only using its own biogas. It doesn't have to turn it into hydrogen and then run its things. It goes directly from its biogas, turning their turbines. So what I and some others are saying, and by the way, when I say I am being informed by leading engineers in Silicon Valley, on the Central Coast, in the San Francisco Bay Area, in LA, in San Diego, and across the country. You have challenged my sources and told me I need to fact check. I'm not sure what your sources are, but these are leading engineers who are making these statements that it takes 4 times the amount of energy use for hydrogen in vehicles. Right now, I can plug into my wall and charge up my car for 1/4 of the amount of energy that hydrogen represents. You have to convert it, as I said before, convert it all to hydrogen from our renewable sources, and then turn it back into electricity. That is pointless. And I don't understand why the president and the governor have made this a priority. It does not make any sense. Mercedes, by the way, has an electric semi that will go over 1,000 miles on a charge. Tesla has a semi that will go 500 miles on a charge, carrying 82,000. So, Jared, no, your facts are not accurate. As far as energy storage, our batteries are mobile energy storage units, especially school buses, which only have a limited time that they're being used, but they have big batteries and they can be taken to emergency situations for direct fueling of whatever is needed at that site.
30 seconds.
To someone else pointed this out, but I want to emphasize it, to be putting up to 5%, meaning less than 5% in the pipes, it requires still having natural gas going through the pipes. And it has, because hydrogen is the smallest element, it has a high leakage. It leaks, and it's highly corrosive, and it's highly explosive. This is the wrong direction for us to be taking. We do not have the time to take this. Also, the ports, Oakland, Los Angeles, and Long Beach, have already been progressing in their transition to electric, and now they are being interrupted by pilots from hydrogen. It is not necessary, please. I wonder if you actually listen to what we're saying, or if you already have preconceived notions and just are biding time by letting us speak. Really. So please, this is an unnecessary step in our transition that is necessary as quickly as possible. Thank you.
So since you called me out specifically, I'm going to respond here because there's a couple of things that are worth mentioning. One, the world vision where everything's electric and all renewable is a vision that we would all want, because that means there's no combustion and we all have the energy we all want and need to go about our daily lives, run an economy, and be able to do all the things we like take kids to school or go to the grocery store. That is a world vision that I think most of us would like, because we care about the environment and we care about public health. The reality is it's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not even going to happen by 2035 or 2040. There's no way to build out that grid for clean electricity fast enough to make sure that we have all the energy we need to electrify everything that is powered by fossil fuels today. And that is where solutions like hydrogen need to be seriously considered. And so, yes, in a perfect world where everything was available on a time frame that we wanted, we would be there. But that is not the reality of the situation. And so when you can't get to the perfect, you have to think about the tools you have and how to utilize those tools today to get anything better than fossil fuels today. Because as we sit here waiting for that perfect vision for 2045 or 2030 or 2035 of only electricity, all renewables built, no transmission constraints, everything's perfect. While we're waiting for that future to materialize, we're still using fossil fuels. That's still loading GHGs into the atmosphere. That is still polluting communities and roadways and parts of the state that are in non-attainment areas. So yes, we've heard everything that you have said. We have heard everything that has been said today, everything that is said in our comment letters, and everything that was said as part of the hearings on 1075 and as part of the scoping plan process. Same goes for the other agencies that run a robust public process. They hear all the comments. How do I know? Because we talk about the comments and try to figure out what we're going to do and what the best path forward is. The reality is that hydrogen is going to remain something that is critical to use, because we don't have all the electricity today and may not have it in the next 2 decades. In terms of the experts, you are welcome to invite them to participate in our workshops. And you're welcome to share the listserv link with them so they can be notified when workshops are happening, so they can be part of the discussion. We welcome wide and broad participation on the issues that we're tackling here. But at the end of the day, we do have to come up with recommendations, and we do have to balance where we want to be versus the reality of where we can be and all the tools we have available to us and the authorities that we have under statute to actually act on things. That is the reality of what we have to do as the people sitting here, taking in this input and then having to deliver programs and policies that actually show progress on improving air quality and actually reducing emissions today and tomorrow and in the near term, while setting us up for 2045. Thanks, Carrie.
Okay, going to our next commenter is Reese Hart. You should be able to unmute yourself and state your comment.
Thanks for that. I'm Reese Hart. I'm a principal with Ricardo. I'd just like to respond to Beverly there as well. So just for her background, I'm an advisor to the UK government in terms of decarbonisation, and that's looking at both electrification and hydrogen. She had some pertinent points certainly around electrification and well-to-wheel uses. But I'd just like to point out that the IEA is only expecting hydrogen to make up 10% of the total energy mix by 2050. The vast majority of it is going to be electrified. We still require green hydrogen in places where grey hydrogen is used today. So that's things like ammonia and fertilizers, methanol and refineries. It's probably going to be used in things like the production of steel and such. So it does play into that, irrespective of how much we can electrify. Green hydrogen is still necessary. Looking at the transportation and trucks more specifically, I think there's a bit of ignorance on how that market actually operates. So as Jared Ferguson pointed out, trucks are looking to run 24 hours a day in a lot of instances. With electrification, you're looking at downtimes of over an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours to actually recharge those trucks, which just isn't feasible or competitive. Hydrogen is very much a better contender in 99% of cases. There are instances, and I know that Pepsi are looking at using, the Tesla haulage vehicles, and they've been working well for them, but it's not always going to be a best fit. And further to what Rajinder has said, we do have to be pragmatic about this. Ultimately, trying to do things perfectly is the enemy of trying to do things good enough. And I think we'd rather get to a place good enough first, and then we can start having discussions about doing it perfectly.
Okay, thank you. Next commenter is Mikhail Skvarla. You should be able to unmute yourself and provide your comment.
Hi, Mikhail Skvarla here on behalf of California Hydrogen Coalition and California Business Council. Just a couple contextual comments. I think from the CPUC presentation, the discussion around pipelines, the United States, mainly in the Gulf Coast, but even in California, have been safely operating hydrogen pipelines for decades. To the extent that we can help feed in the appropriate information on safety and standards there to apply to the CPUC's work on a potential common carrier pipeline, we'd appreciate the opportunity to provide that information. There is a private pipeline in Southern California that's been operating safely for years, and to the extent that we can manage those things, I believe the UC has also performed some analyses on embrittlement, which has been expressed as a fear. Most of the embrittlement stuff even in existing pipelines can be mitigated with various dopings and sacrificial coatings, thus avoiding any kind of potential risks in that space. And to the extent that we can employ known and tested best management practices, that would be imperative to us moving forward at the pace necessary to achieve carbon neutrality. Additionally, I want to add some context to a couple of things that have been said. The 2022 IPER had information that was curated by National Renewable Energy Laboratory, NREL, indicating that hydrogen refueling stations on average provide 44 times more energy per day than the publicly funded direct current fast chargers, and 428 times more energy per day than publicly funded level 2 chargers. When adjusted for the cost, because hydrogen stations do cost more, but we serve more vehicles per day, we are about 15 times more expensive per public dollar. That said, adjusting the amount of energy delivered per public dollar, hydrogen refueling stations delivering 3 times more energy per public dollar invested today than the DC fast charging network. We are in the nascence of this industry. We have the number 1 and number 3 auto manufacturers in the world delivering very good zero emission fuel cell electric vehicles today to market. And it is imperative that we provide all Californians, as was highlighted by GO-Biz, an option to go. So be it, you park on the street, you're in multifamily dwellings, you have to tow or haul for a living, we're working in vocational trades such as construction, agriculture, so on. You will need this access to convenient, reliable hydrogen refueling in order to continue your day-to-day life in a zero-emission vehicle, which is mandated by 2035 per the Advanced Clean Cars 2 regulation and the governor's executive order. So we don't have time to delay on that.
30 seconds.
Additionally, we curtailed 2.5 terawatt hours. It's 2.5 billion kilowatt hours. Hundreds of billions of ratepayer dollars are being negatively priced or is grounded on an annual basis. To the extent that we can integrate hydrogen into our energy system to, again, bring decarbonization sooner and to more people, the better. And to the extent that we look at this as a system and not hydrogen as a separate piece of the economy, the better it will be for California's climate ambition. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next, we will go to Julia Levin. You should be able to unmute yourself and provide your comment.
Hi again, Julia Levin with the Bioenergy Association of California. I want to respond to 3 points from some of the speakers and from the Air Board. The first is about the need for hydrogen. I don't think any of us is advocating for hydrogen as a way to extend the use of fossil fuels. I'm certainly not. I don't think that's what the state agencies are doing. But there are a lot of hard or impossible to electrify end uses, including a lot of heavy duty trucks, as several speakers have noted, aviation fuels, but also a lot of manufacturing requires combustion. Electricity simply doesn't get things hot enough. And ironically, solar panels are first on that list. You cannot make a solar panel without some amount of combustion. Otherwise, you just can't get the materials hot enough. That's also true of steel, cement, glass, and other materials that need to be manufactured. So if you say we're going to electrify everything, you are essentially saying California is giving up on having a manufacturing sector or being able to make a lot of the materials that we use in the state. Second of all, we need hydrogen and other renewable gases for electricity reliability. Even if we are able to electrify almost everything, we need a lot of firm power. And if we max out all of our geothermal and all of our bioenergy, it still won't be enough. We're going to need renewable hydrogen to have electricity reliability, both for firm power and for long duration storage. And that brings me to batteries. I find it really ironic that environmental groups are giving batteries a complete pass when they are the farthest thing from perfect or benign. The mining for battery materials is devastating. Black and brown countries, indigenous lands in South America, the not democratic Republic of Congo, where they're using child labor and slave labor, the human rights and environmental violations from battery mining are atrocious. That is not a perfect solution. And last, I want to talk about electrification as not being a perfect solution. And this is maybe the one area where I really disagree with Rajinder's comments. I don't think the ideal world we will electrify absolutely everything. A lot more, definitely, but everything, no. We'll never have perfect electricity reliability, especially in a state that's prone to wildfires. But electricity infrastructure itself is the cause of most of our large wildfires. According to CAL FIRE, the state's fire tracking and fighting agency, electricity infrastructure and operations cause the majority of our large catastrophic wildfires. And those fires are in turn killing people directly from the fires themselves, and even more deaths from all the smoke caused by those fires. They are now the
30 seconds.
First or second largest source of air pollution in the state is large wildfires, and the majority of those are caused by electricity infrastructure. So there are a lot of complicated issues here, not to defend fossil fuels, but we need renewable hydrogen to fill in some of these other critical uses and have clean energy reliability.
Thank you for your comments. Next commenter will be Sasan Sadat. You should be able to unmute and provide your comment.
Thanks. Yeah, Sasan Sadat with Earth Justice. Thanks to all the presenters and the agencies for convening us. I know it's an issue that has a lot of really strong perspectives, and there's just a lot of uncertainty. But I want to offer a couple things that it would be really great to see more discussion of in the eventual SB 1075 report. And this isn't like you have to come to this conclusion or that conclusion, just literally like it would be great to have some discussion about these risks that I think many in the environmental community have kind of raised in certain ways in today's workshop. So the first is I agree with lots of people need green hydrogen in California. But I think there should be a discussion about the risks of using hydrogen where it's not needed. In other words, the risks of oversizing our hydrogen use or even just missequencing it. So like using it for fuels and energy instead of as a feedstock. And those risks, to my mind, are the fact that with hydrogen, you get less fossil fuel displacement than direct electrification, wherever direct electrification would have been possible. I know there's a lot of debate about where it would have been and where it wouldn't have been, but just, I guess, like an honest acknowledgement of that there is a risk associated with using hydrogen where we could have instead used direct electrification. It's not a costless choice. And second, the opportunity cost of displacing gray hydrogen. So when we're using hydrogen for cars or trucks or locomotives or blending it into the gas pipeline, we're using it for something that theoretically, at least, direct electrification can also do. But with displacing, for example, the ammonia fertilizer that we import from Russia today to power the Central Valley, that's something electrons can't do today. And so we really should focus green hydrogen in those sectors where it's a feedstock, where we need a molecule. So incorporating a discussion about how we sequence deployment of hydrogen so that it's optimal, I think will be really helpful for the report. And then second, sort of a lot more color than we got in the scoping plan about the full system challenges of a green hydrogen economy. Like we need I think it's so true that we're not anywhere near solving all the problems of having a stable, fully electrified, clean grid. But I also think that some of the problems with electrification feel more real because we're already running into them in our nascent stage of deployment. Whereas with hydrogen, I think we give a lot of deference to the end user, like, oh yeah, it's faster refueling time, just like diesel. But sometimes that, truncates the view of how do you get the hydrogen to that port terminal? Like right now, you
30
truck
seconds.
it on a diesel truck, on a tank on a diesel truck. So what would it actually take to have a pipeline built that supplies green hydrogen to that port terminal? I think we just need to have an honest assessment of the full system challenges, not just what the, end user would prefer. Because in many cases, the logistics of making green hydrogen work from an infrastructure standpoint, from a safety perspective, are just much more overwhelming and daunting than if we were to focus on electrifying. But yeah, so just including those two kinds of risk assessments in the 1075 report, I think would go a long way to getting us a really robust report. And thanks again.
Thanks, Hassan. This is Rajinder, and I couldn't agree with you more about taking a systems approach. And I really appreciate you flagging some very good areas for us to consider and think about how to incorporate into the final report here. So thank you for that.
Okay, our next commenter is Linda Hutchins-Knowles. You should be able to unmute and provide your comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly follow up. Thank you, Rajinder, for really validating Sasan's comment about a full systems approach. And I hope that there'll be a chance for, ample evaluation of what you come up with by experts such as Earth Justice and others. And also, I wanted to reply to Julia Levin, who was talking about how we could never rely on electricity only, and her pointing out that electricity has been the cause of fires. And I want to point out that that's why we need more rooftop solar. And, the recent CPUC changes to NEM are really moving in the wrong direction. And they're now considering taking away rooftop solar incentives for schools and agriculture and multifamily housing. And they're currently deciding that. And I hope they're listening today and really will not do that, because rooftop solar would be a way to avoid those fires and be able to use the batteries from our electric vehicles to power our homes without the risk of fires. And the amount of battery storage available could actually stabilize the grid. So I just wanted to push back a bit on her comments about that. And again, let's make sure that, like Sasan said, we're right-sizing this and that we're not thinking hydrogen is a solution to all of our problems, only in a few very, very select cases. And even aviation now, there is great breakthroughs with aviation, electrifying it, and great breakthroughs with heavy duty trucking. So just because maybe today that's not quite ready to go, I think it'll be ready faster to go than trying to build out this whole hydrogen pipeline system and having those stranded assets that Sarah mentioned. So thank you very much.
Thanks for that comment, Linda. I just want to flag one thing. I think this issue of electrification and renewables and all the places where we need to do electrification and the amount of electrification we would need in the form of renewables for hydrogen is going to be a very important part of the 1075 report, because the historical growth rate in renewables has been about 2.7, or the max was 2.7 gigawatts in a single year. In the scoping plan, when we even have very limited hydrogen use there, we're looking at 4 to 5 gigawatts of growth in renewables for California consumption year over year for the next 2.5 decades. Like, again, we keep running into that math problem. We keep running into the footprint of renewables, the amount of power they can produce, and the amount of demand that we're going to be adding on if we want to electrify as much as we can in the scoping plan. So this whole math equation is going to be very central to what we're trying to do in 1075. And we've done some work on it in the scoping plan. And we're also doing similar work in SB 100 with CEC and CPUC, which is about building out a clean, affordable, reliable grid and looking at scenarios for how much load growth is going to be needed. Thanks.
All right. Thanks everyone for this robust discussion. It's 11:55, so we're wrapping up soon. We have time for one more commenter. So Tim Sassine, I'm unmuting you. You should be able to unmute yourself and provide your comment.
Yes, am I coming through now?
Yes, I hear you.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you. Tim Sassine from Ballard Power Systems. Just wanted to thank everyone involved for this great discussion. A joint effort on this is something that we've asked for a long time. And to everyone's point, really, I think the hydrogen industry is behind using hydrogen where it is most economic and effective, and only where it's most economic and effective, because the grid and battery can do really great things where it's most appropriate. But this effort really needs to look at that long-term vision of California, where we want to go, and to find the most resilient and most cost-effective way to achieve it with zero carbon and zero emission. We know that we're going to have to make a lot more renewable energy. Our grid is at best 50% now renewables. That means we've got to double it for that sake. But to electrify all of transportation through hydrogen or through the grid is going to require at least as much energy, as many have finally acknowledged. That means we need at least 4 times the renewables that we have today. That means additionality is inevitable, and resilience in all these changing loads and sources is going to be a challenge. And we need to give our grid operators the maximum opportunity to keep electricity flowing. Electricity is not a luxury, particularly in times of extreme heat or cold. People rely on it, and reliability has to be key right along our long-term goals of zero carbon. And we got to make sure that every tool that our grid operators can use is fully available to them for the lowest cost and for the most effective zero emission efforts. So thank you again for this full systems approach. And I do believe that California is agreeing on a very nuanced and, I would say, adult approach at energy through our approach to hydrogen. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. That concludes our comment section. Our session today. I really appreciate everyone's participation. Just as a reminder, we do have a public comment period that will take written comment, and that's on the SB 1075 website on CARB's page, and that will be open for 2 weeks. So please do provide that comment or reach out to us if needed. I'm going to transfer it over to Jaya to close us out.
Thanks, Carrie. And thank you all for your comments and participation in this workshop. This was a great kickoff session for this work. And a big thank you to the panelists for their time and presentations on their respective agencies and their work around hydrogen. A reminder, if you would like to submit additional comments or something that wasn't appropriate for the forum here, there will be a link posted on the meetings and workshops section of CARB's SB 1075 webpage, to the same place where you've registered for this, that will remain open for submission until September 19th. The presentations and recording this workshop will be available in the same place as soon as we can get that up. Thank you all for your time, and have a great rest of your day.